Backstabbing. Or do you allow player characters to take on other player characters and do nefarious things to them? This video discusses the interesting approach to handling backstabbing. A player hands you this note. After you read this note, please do the following. Pick up a rule book and look like you're searching for something. Pick another character at random and ask them to roll a d20. Smile, scribble something on this note, and return it to me. So what do you do if somebody hands you that note? Do you actually do it? Do you follow what he asks you to do? Think about what that simple act would do to the game that you're playing. It says nothing's been done, no one's been harmed, no one has come up and tried to poison or kill another character. They've just done something. They've asked the DM to pretend, to add a, shall we say, a meta game on top of things. It's a mind, playing with someone's mind about making them think that somebody's trying to stab them in the back when they're not really doing that. So that can set up a whole interesting chain of events, because it can cause friction between the characters in a mock type of world. It can add interesting intrigue to the game. You know, characters I've seen where player characters, one would they would attempt to pickpocket the other characters, but then of course you always get the more interesting pickpocketing, where you're not trying to take anything away, but you're trying to put something into their pocket. So for example, say one of the characters stumbles on a small treasure, say a handful of jewels, but the party knows that there are more jewels in the dungeon or wherever they're exploring. So instead of sharing them with the party, first off, he pockets them all. But then as the game goes on, he pickpockets and puts a couple in one of the players' pockets. Then later on accuses that character of stealing part of the treasure when they find it, that you stole more than your share. And the guy's going, no, well, turn out your pockets, let's see. And there they are. So you can do some interesting nefarious things to someone without ever hurting them or causing any loss of damage or hit points. I grew up playing a variety of different games, and one of them was Avalon Hill's Diplomacy. I'll put a link down in the description where you can find it on Amazon. Diplomacy is a fascinating game. If you can get 7 players together, you really want to play it with 7. Get 7 people together in a space and set you really got to time it. You got to set your limits on your times. Diplomacy is an interesting game in that there's nothing random. You don't use dice, you don't use cards, you don't use spinners. It's all just negotiation and backstabbing. And what happens is that it gives you a different view on that. It's a very some people hate the game, I'm sure. A lot of people really love the game. It's a great, if you've got 7 people or more, because then you could have multiple people on one team. But you really want to play it with 7 players, because it is much more balanced with 7. If you play it even with 6, it's not as much fun as it is with 7. So you get 7 people together, you sit down, plan an evening, and you have to agree beforehand when you're going to end, because some will want to keep going and some will want to stop. And I've never ever seen anybody play to the end of Diplomacy, because it could be a very, very long game. But it's set up before World War I, and there are other videos of people talking about it here on YouTube. But it tells you the different approaches to backstabbing, because in Diplomacy, you almost have to stab somebody in the back eventually, because you can't win the game any other way. It's really a challenging interpersonal relationship, or though you're playing nations and so on. And I like that type of challenge in moving it into role-playing. I still remember I was playing a game called On Guard, which is about as politically incorrect as you can get, because it plays only men. You can't have female characters, because the men, because at the time frame that let's be honest, it was a true men ran things. Women were relegated to being mistresses, and it was interesting challenge. And I was trying to bring up my nobleman, and he was a bit of a wimp and going on, and a friend of mine was also playing, and he decided to get really kind of nasty. And so his character was the bastard peasant of the bastard son of an impoverished peasant, which puts him really low on the social level. And On Guard is all about social level. And so what happens is you can only court a mistress. You can court a mistress up to 2 social levels above you, or you can court one below you. And there are advantages to having the mistresses in the game, because they can give you money and so on. But it helps with your social standing if the mistress is higher social level than you are. But you can't win a mistress that's more than 2 levels above you, but you can court one. Well, it's an interesting thing it says if 2 men try to court the same mistress on the same play, what happens is a duel will result. So my character is sort of a wimp, and this other character, he'd been sending his bastard son of an impoverished peasant out to train with the sword for weeks, and his patron was actually giving him money enough to survive, and so he was actually kind of impressive. And he knew that I was trying to court one particular mistress, which was fairly high level, and so I go to court the mistress, and this bastard son of an impoverished peasant shows up at the same time, which means that I have to challenge him to a duel, which is horrible, because I know I'll lose if we actually have a duel, because my character has never picked up a sword in the game, and so he's got to come up, and my only option, of course, is to bow out of the duel, which affects my social level significantly. I was expecting to actually go up in social level and On Guard, and instead I go down a social level because a friend had done that. And it was, sure, I could have went through with the duel and died, but, you have to back off. But that's the fun. That was fun, because I really was surprised at how much fun it was when somebody stabbed me in the back, because it was interesting to see because it had taken a long time to build up this character just to sabotage my character. And it was sort of a practical jokes in things like that. So your character comes up and puts something in one of the other character's pocket. The classic one is that, that they have some ring which indicates their membership to some secret society. Like Spectre and some of the James Bond flicks, they have the Spectre ring. So what happens is your character finds out about that. You've found some or seen some throughout the campaign. So a character goes and commissions to have several made just like that. And then what happens is he comes in at the appropriate time, tries to sneak it into the pocket of one of the other player characters. So now then you can accuse them of being, actually working for the other side and doing things like that. And that doesn't even have to be a fantasy type game. That could be, a James Bond or spy thriller where you add a whole bunch of subterfuge and you're making someone else look like they're working for the other side. Those type of games are very interesting, and they really increase the player dynamic. Now it can get kind of brutal. I say I'm one of the few people I know that did a total party kill as a player character. Yes, I killed the entire party. What happened was years ago, where I think we were playing 3rd edition of D&D, and for some reason I irritated one of the other players. And I don't really, to this day, I don't know what I did to her. But I tend to play maybe sort of a fighter tank type character who goes out there, and she was playing, I can't remember what it was, some sort of magic user, and she kept trying to kill my character in the adventures. So we're playing, and it was, shall we say, a bit of a Monty Hall, relatively high level game. So I was working with the DM. You could build that on. What happened was I built up an army. I had I think it was 100 men in training that reported to me. I had a military command and so on, which I was hoping the Dungeon Master would eventually let me take them into battle against some creatures and things like that, but that just wasn't the way the campaign was working. But I had them, and I came up with a brilliant idea. And I said, I was upset with this woman her character had tried to kill my character several times, and I really had never even struck back at her. So what happened was I told my troops. I got my troops that were going on the campaign. We're going through this portal, and when we come back, he says, if I come back, I want you to be prepared. And I'd mapped it all out for the Dungeon Master. I said, I want to build, I think it was like 4 or 5 ballista and a catapult with flaming oil, and everything aimed and targeted right at the exit of the structure we had to go in to get it through the gate. And I said, and I want you to build trenches with spikes and things like that. And he says, my goal is that when I return, I will be try and be the first one out this door, and I'll tell you, so we'll get ready. So we go on this adventure, and it's actually a long adventure, and we come through, and she tried to kill me, I think, twice during that adventure, but he managed to come back. So nobody's thinking about anything, that we're coming back, except the Dungeon Master, who is really sort of chuckling. And I said, well, I'm going to go lead the way out. So I'm heading out, and I'm well ahead of everybody out there, and I come out, and I step out the door, and I tell the troops, get ready. When the next person comes through the door, open fire. And so then I actually jump down into a 60-foot pit with spikes. My character survives, but that caused significant damage. But anyway, so the next character walks through the door, and they open fire with all these ballistas and catapults. And the Dungeons and Dragons, unless you go back to OD&D, and I think there's a edition called Swords and Spells, which handles mass combat, and there's some comments about that being in 5th edition. But the concept of ballistas and catapults doing tremendous amounts of damage are there. So they hit, with all the ballistas go on, and then the DM, we're lobbying a large catapult, lobbying a tremendous amount of oil, and he rolled, it was 30 dice worth of damage. And of course, the catapult missed and landed on my character, which is how I died. They burnt me up, but it was my crew survived. My company of merry men, my band of brothers, who basically off this extremely high level party, and the highest level of those I think was a 7th level follower. But everything else, they fired catapults and ballistas. It's like one of the nastiest traps I've ever used. is a ballista with a kobold. And what happens is the kobold doesn't have to be too bright, and you go, yeah, you wait. It says it's already pre-targeted. When you see the man with the pointy head step there, then you pull this lever. And, you know, I did this once to a party, and the party, of course, they were reasonably high level, retaliated, blasting fireballs and, you know, charging up there. And it's a lone kobold defending his home, of course. But what happens is that it makes it interesting to, you know, to do that. I'm getting off the topic about making challenges the other ways, but it's the idea that players can interact with the other players, and it doesn't always have to be advantageous. It doesn't have to be a good campaign. It can be a lot of backstabbing, trying to kill each other. It can actually be a lot of fun, and I've had fun in campaigns doing that. So like to hear your thoughts. Put some comments in down below. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, and maybe subscribe to my channel. Thank you.